So I want to welcome our guests. We have Rashidi Harper, and I don't want to go into a whole lot of the bio because that's some of the questions we're going to ask. And of course, we have our own Nika Sewell-Smith, and you guys are very familiar with her. And again, there will be some questions asked. So anyway, you can read on the bio that was on about them on the flyer that was distributed. So I am going to open this up again and welcome everyone. And let me stop sharing. So good morning, Miss Nika Sewell-Smith and Rashidi Harper. How are you all doing?
Doing well. Happy to be here.
We'll see about that because this is something new for you. So Nika, I want to welcome you, and I'm actually going to ask you the first question because a lot of people would like to know, you know, we know you're a consultant with Ancestry. We know you led Black Pro-Gen with over 100 and some episodes of panel discussions and things, but we also know about TRAS 250, which is your own project that you have built with probably over, I don't want to say 4,000, but I think you're close to 4,000. Is it 3,000?
Close to 8.
Oh my goodness, on your research efforts on tracking enslaved individuals from, I'm going to say, New England all the way down to Louisiana, and which is exciting. But how did you actually just get started in genealogy? What piqued your interest? And that question's coming to you, Rashidi, a little differently.
I don't think we've ever had this conversation.
We haven't.
I don't think we ever asked each other. Okay, right. So it's a loaded question. My journey to genealogy starts in Memphis, believe it or not. I went to a family reunion in this direction from my house when I was 6 years old. And one of my mother's cousins had put together this family tree. In fact, I have a picture of my grandmother in the Memphis International Airport holding her little tube with this family tree. And that tree was one of the first things I remember reading by myself. So I would like roll it out on the table, you know, get whatever was there to hold it. I guess at that point that was like an ashtray and something else, you know, whatever was heavy in the house. Now I put it on the end, and I just would read it, and I would question my mom like all over the place, like asking her who all the people were. And so naturally I was just a curious child, or nosy, depending on how you would phrase it. So that meant that I would sit under the table while they were playing bit whist and spades and be hearing all the conversations. And I was kind of taking all the information in. And when I got to college, I thought my cousin had been maintaining that tree and he wasn't. So I then sort of took it over. And at that point, you know, online research hadn't really started, but then it really like came to the fray within like a few years. So that's really pretty much where I got my start. But one of the things I think folks fail to realize is that we have genealogists or family historians in our families. They may just not call themselves that. They may just see it as the person that has the history. You know, you call Aunt Cheryl and she has a history, like, or they are the ones that remember conversations and things. And so we naturally have them. It's just those who choose to walk in it as a career get labeled, you know, with the title.
And with you saying about the family historians, I always call one of the places we need to research the house repositories. That would be with the aunties, the uncles, the grandparents, and so forth. Got to check home first to find out what everybody knows while we're on this journey. So you also have another passion, and it's photography.
Which I haven't been doing too much of that.
Well, I'm hoping that we get back to that because you have an excellent webinar on Legacy Family webinar that you went through photography tips and things on that. So a lot of people don't know that other side of you, but your website is Who is Nika Smith? And so they're able to go there, you know, to see that other side of you, besides you running Black Pro-Gen and all of those things. And for the audience that doesn't know about Black Pro-Gen, I would like you to share a little bit about that.
Right, because you're there 90% of the time. It's a ragtag group of family historians, both male and female identified, old and young. We fuss, we talk trash, but a lot of times we are learning and sharing what we're finding, and we have themed episodes depending on like what you're looking for. And we really pretty much have talked about everything. Like we literally have. How some people may say there's a tweet for everything, there's an episode of Black Girl Gen for literally everything. In fact, I was just talking about Miss Callie House a couple days ago because someone was talking about reparations. Nobody has ever sued. I was like, go. You need to go look at Callie House.
And go to episode.
Right, right, because we got a whole episode about her in the time they sued the federal government, but we're not going to talk about that. All right, but anyway, it's more than 130 episodes. It's a panel. We even give people the opportunity to ask questions and get help on their research. And that gets fun too. That time we found that newspaper article with a person, did the grandfather kill somebody? It was not planned. They never see that stuff, but it's fun. And people are still watching it. In fact, when I was at the University of Pennsylvania a couple days ago, there were viewers in the audience. It's always shocking to me to find out who watches that. So yeah, check it out.
And
it's on YouTube.
There's something for everybody. And we even went state by state, kind of regions, special collections and things. So that brings me to introduce and welcome again Rashidi Harper. So I'm not going to ask you about genealogy yet, but what I'm going to ask you is your role as a producer. What got you there?
Yeah, I'm a director and producer, and I started as an actor. That's how I got into the business. My mother was a theater major at Los Angeles City College, and I used to go to her rehearsals all the time because there wasn't a babysitter, and I would just roll with her. And I learned a lot in those early years of just watching the director stage the play. I learned a lot about emotions, blocking. It just was a cool education. And so I've always been interested in the arts. And at about 16, I think I decided that I wanted to become a director. And I just, always started moving in that direction and was always very curious about how to make it happen. And fortunately, I'm from Los Angeles, was raised between here and the Bay Area. And I wound up finding my way. I think I got my first shot doing music videos, and I started directing those. And then my career just grew from there.
Oh, awesome. And so any interest in genealogy or your family history on your side? And then we'll get to the film.
Yeah, I think personally, I've always been interested. I'm not interested enough to do research and really dig, but more of a passive interest. Fortunately, I've had my grandfather who not only shared a lot of information, but actually wrote a book. He sort of wrote this wonderful book that's just private for our family, about how he met my grandmother. And in that, there's a lot of information. And I used to go to New York a lot. And I remember one day he told me while I was in New York, I should go to the Schomburg, and he gave me a name to look up. And I went to the Schomburg Center for research and found some information on my family in there. And that's probably when I started paying a little more attention, but then, life happens and you're focused on your goals and whatever's happening in your life. And then you don't really think about it that much, or at least for me.
Yeah. And I think that happens with a lot of us. And so, Nika, you were the genealogist, and what we're here to really discuss is about A Dream Delivered, the lost letters of Hawkins Wilson. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I've seen it 10 times. And I still, even thinking of the emotion right now, I'm tearing up a little bit because of what came out of there. So number one, before I even get into questions, and then you and Nika talking and whatever, I'm going to say thank you, because it really brought it home for the work that I do, what the museum will be doing in telling that story and bringing those things forth. Because people don't know and they don't understand what's really out there. And there are stories to be told. And that is the mission of this museum. And of course, the Center for Family History. So I'm going to direct back to Nika as the genealogist. You're right there on the opening. So will you give us a little bit of your path on what you did? And then I'm going to go back to Rashidi on where he was going in his vision. But tell me yours first.
Well, that's funny you bring up that scene. It was a juggling act. I think it was the first one. You weren't sitting behind me when the movie starts. You weren't. I don't think.
You're talking about Rashidi?
Yes, right. When I'm driving in the car and I'm having
right.
You weren't sitting behind me. So there was a lot. So when you say the opening of the film, I'm thinking, where was my mind at when I was?
You were in the car going down the road.
Right.
I don't remember not being in the car. You're saying I wasn't in the car?
You weren't the first time we filmed. You weren't sitting behind me.
Oh.
Right. Well, you can't see that in the film, but
well, and
normally,
it's interesting because we don't know what goes behind the scenes on any production. That's why I directed it to you first, because he's going to give a different statement. So you were in the car.
Right. I was in the car. I had never done that before. Number one, you know, just how the angles were, where to look, how to drive, how to answer coherently. That was like a challenge.
Let me jump in and say,
go ahead, go for it.
I put Nika in a very challenging situation in that I asked her to drive a vehicle with a camera, a big camera mounted on the hood of the vehicle off to the side a little bit so she could still see while I was asking her questions. So it was a challenging situation that I put her in, but I think I did that because I find that when people are engaged in something else, they can answer questions a little more with their guard down. And it's also just a mechanism that I like to use. I feel like it's more cinematic and it's interesting. It's a little more interesting than someone sitting in a chair talking, which is what we're typically used to. So I try to, in my work, find ways to keep people active and to get the best interview out of them. So I don't know if that was the best in terms of putting her in a challenging situation, but she was great. You were a pro. You did wonderfully, if I may say so myself. I was very happy.
And who came up with the message in the dialogue? And you're saying you asked her questions, or was that Nika just talking? Did she have the point and then she just talked, or how did that kind of go?
So typically how I do it is I'll sort of give an idea of where we're going, but I won't give a list of questions necessarily. I don't think I did that. I think I was trying to just have a conversation with her. And so the goal was for her to speak conversationally and not like she was answering a question per se. And that's how we began. So most of those I was in the back seat behind her, sort of tucked so you couldn't see me, but I could see her, and I had a little monitor and I'm talking to her while we're driving. And so both of our lives are in her hands, you know?
Absolutely. Her at the wheel.
So I crashed. I didn't even think about that. Right. I wasn't going that fast though. But like still.
We were very safe. This was a very safe production, I just want to say.
It was. Okay. It was, right. We weren't out there off-roading. But you forgot we had also, I mean, it was a whole apparatus. Like, I don't know. It was, I was comfortable, but it was like, gosh, this is a lot. And what I loved about the process working with Rashidi and all the other folks, which, hello, Rob, he's watching. I got to learn throughout the whole thing. Like, I got to sit and watch Rashidi. I got to sit and watch the DP who was like loading all the cameras and setting up the lights and all that. And so that part of my world photography world was so cool to have that part. But yeah, Rashidi's very vibe driven. Like what does it feel like today? Let me just ask this and like let me see what she says or what she thinks. So I don't really even think that I don't really ever remember seeing lists of questions. He was just asking me and I was just responding, which I think that conveyed well across the screen. It seemed very natural and very organic. Like you wanted to feel homey. You wanted to feel like you're in the seat next to me and you're the one asking me questions, or you're listening to me tell stories or like recount parts of like what's happening, like that you're along for the journey, you know. And that's the whole point. That's the why the perspective of the camera is set where it was so that the viewer felt like they were in the car, or they felt like they were sitting at the table with us, or like they were on the beach with us. I guess that was a creative. Am I correct in that?
Well, and I'm going to say I was in that car driving right along with you, or sitting in there, because that is how it came across, at least for me. But again, I'm a researcher. I have that quest of finding that knowledge and the things you were talking about, and basically setting the scene of where it was going, you know, researching for your family and things like that. So Rashidi, does that come from your vision, or does someone else design what path you're taking? You know, I'm trying to understand how this comes together.
So in this instance, there was a team from Ancestry and there was a team from Paramount, who are the people that brought me onto the project. And they had an overall idea of what they were looking for. And then my job is to interpret what it is that they're looking for and put my spin on it. And I think that one thing that I was very conscious of is creating an intimate environment where people could share and not necessarily feel like, man, there's all these cameras in my face or whatever. But even though those things are happening, to create a space for everyone on camera where they feel comfortable and confident in the moment is a vibe that I try to create. And that's why I work with my cinematographer, Robert Benavidez, and our whole team at Harperville to really help create and craft a moment, because in this particular film, you know, these are people's lives that we're sort of breaking into a little bit and helping reveal some things about family members that they don't even know or might not have been aware of. And so we wanted to just be highly, highly respectful during the whole filmmaking process, and creating a situation where they trusted us, which is hard to do, right? Like I'm popping up into a city, no one's met me before except on one Zoom, and then I'm asking to come in their house and, hey, can you wear this type of thing? And all of these different demands that I'm asking to try to create this vision of an intimate journey of a family learning about their history.
Right. And so with that, Nika, we get to the Freedmen's Bureau, which is one of our passions. And there's a letter. And can you give us a little background on getting there to Hawkins Wilson's and to the descendants, and how that all came together?
Right. That was about a year-long process. You know, the film itself is like just short of like 30 minutes, you know, so you have to remember there was a whole lot of stuff that they led up to like us getting to like the production and theatrics and all that kind of stuff. So I was part of the team at Ancestry that did the research, that was trying to track down descendants. Hawkins Wilson, this letter is probably one of the most published letters, I think, from the collection. And I think it's because of the level of detail he gives and the fact that it's like a first person account. And, you know, we're constantly like yearning for first person accounts of our ancestors. So, you know, it's just taking it. You've got all these wonderful details about where he was enslaved and where, you know, who enslaved his family. And so naturally you can plug those things into a tree. But we know, for those of us that research African-American families and people who descend from the enslaved, it's not as easy as, you know, go to this city and potentially find this person. Like, if you're really doing your due diligence, you're trying to find the documents that connect the two, that are between the letter and those people, that just kind of flesh them out on paper. So that was a long process. It was trying to track descendants down. I mean, working from the past forward instead of working from the present backwards. That's not usually what we do in genealogy. So it was up to the wire, a little bit, like, are we gonna find people? Then when we did, it was like, yes. So yeah, that was just the process. But the Bureau itself, I mean, there are scores of letters that are just like this. That's the one thing that I want folks to take away from this conversation and from the film, is that Hawkins' letter is one of many that were a part of this collection. And when we make it more available and more accessible, more folks can start to find out these stories and find their ancestors' voices within them. So, again, I don't know if there's a part 2 or a part 3 or a part 4. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll have to see if there's going to be.
Well, first, before we go, for some folks, they might not be aware of what the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands is. So just in case, I think we ought to interject a little bit, because we are talking about the Bureau, as we call it, and what it was initially set up for. And you can share, or I can share, if you want to share about the Bureau.
We can tag team. Right, I was going to say we can
it.
tag team. It doesn't have to always be me. Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, established by Congress in 1865, is a way to stabilize the country and provide autonomy to the formerly enslaved, along with indigent whites. Look at me giving my elevator pitch.
I hear it.
Either way, the Freedmen's Bureau was a very important organization that was really only around a little bit less than a decade. But the records that it generated are similar in size and scale to the U.S. Census. So nationally. So, I mean, you're finding everything from labor contracts between the formerly enslaved and their former slaveholder censuses. They ran schools, hospitals, a cemetery. I just went to the cemetery. If you follow me on social media, I was right at the only one that they actually have, we have records for, in New Orleans. There's all kinds of stuff. What am I forgetting? Complaints.
It was set up pretty much as a relief organization. So people, whites and formerly enslaved, were able to go there to get assistance. And you named off labor contracts, and the assistance are also reconnecting with their family that could have been relocated or sold off, or the various terms we can use in identifying formerly enslaved. And again, people could file complaints there. There were also court hearings. Is it 3.4 million or 3.5 million?
It's 3.5, but that's been bolstered because Ancestry added additional records from Louisiana, from the hospital records, and some more stuff. So it's actually more than that.
Is another thing. Someone could come to the Bureau, say a person who's now free, and say, my wife and children were sold to, I'm in Virginia, and they were sold to Mississippi. The Bureau would arrange transportation to get them there. But one of the key things is to know that these field offices are set up through the South. And you can go to the Mapping the Freedmen's Bureau site and look at where the field offices are set up. So that comes to the point of Hawkins Wilson, because he went to the field office and he asked for assistance in finding his family. So coming to you, Rashidi, was there something that attracted you to this story that you was unaware of, or something new for you to see, for you to get that vision to what we see as the end result, which was fabulous, of course, but what got you there connected, and how did you feel about the experience that you saw happening? And I'm going to say with the descendants reconnecting and things, because I'm going to take an assumption that folks that are here in the audience, that they watched the film. And a plus, because we were marketing to say, watch it before you come listen to the talk. So anyway, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, I think I was hesitant to take the project initially because, there's in the work that I do and how I approach my work, it's a part of me. And it is that, there's a lot of emotions, that happen during any given project. And I wasn't sure at the moment that it was brought to me that I was gonna be able to experience those emotions or deal with those emotions while making this film. I clearly got how important it was. I was moved by the idea of, first of all, this amazing letter that you can't read and not be moved by it emotionally, but also the idea of connecting a letter from 1867 to descendants in 2022 was just amazing to me. It was something that ultimately I couldn't pass up the opportunity, right? And as far as my work, I do a lot of different work with rappers and comedians and actors and sports stars. It's not always this deep, but I have a yearning inside of me to tell important stories, and so I didn't want to pass this opportunity up. And the journey that I was taken on while making the film was life affirming, ancestor affirming. I think one of the first things I said on the call with the clients was at Ancestry and Paramount, that I'm doing this film for the ancestors, all of our ancestors. Like, I'm not here to sort of, give you the version that you think you want to hear. You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to represent the realness of the atrocities that have happened in our country, and do it in a delicate way that doesn't make it like, trauma porn, if you will. You know what I mean? Like, very conscious of being respectful and telling this story with dignity and pride. I think that was off the top where I was coming from, right? That's the only way I could really sink myself into it. And then as far as what I'd learned, I learned a lot, because I didn't really know much about the Freedmen's Bureau, and I didn't know anything about Hawkins Wilson. And I think I had only been to Houston once. I had never been to Virginia. Yeah. I've been to parts of North Carolina. So, the beautiful thing about filmmaking is that when you're making something, it's a journey within itself. And then all of the work as the artist, it's things that I'll take with me for the rest of my life, and the importance of records being kept and the opportunity to go on Ancestry and find those records, or to come to your museum and your department, that I'm sorry, what's it called again? The
Center for Family History.
Right. The Center for Family History. I think those are just wonderful opportunities that anyone in the United States can take advantage of. And I feel like the more exposure a film like ours has, it just makes us think. Many times we're caught up, like I said earlier, in our own lives. And sometimes there's not time to think about the past, but it's so crucial to think about the past and know who you are, and know that some of these things have happened to other families and your family as well,
Yeah, yes, very true. And what do you, both of you, how do you really think, and again, we saw how the descendants reacted to the information. And of course, I'll put my own self in that perspective. And again, well up about reading that this child who becomes a grown man remembers. He was sold, but he remembered. And I often even wondered that he remembered his sisters' names and who owned them. To me, that's probably the most amazing part, was that this child sold off remembered some of those details. And then here we find it in a letter. And so as far as working with the descendants and their emotions, what was that process like? You know, because you're introducing them to a lot of that. Yes, I know there's some prep stuff, you know, as far from the producer and things, but then again, we don't know. So I'm going to throw that to both of you to respond as far as about the descendants and the outcome that we saw on the film.
Nika, I want to start and just say that the blessing of this film is the involvement of Nika and her skill set, not only as a genealogist, but just her as a human being. And what I was able to watch was Nika doing her job, but also being aware, like hyper aware of what the impact was going to be on the descendants, and the way she was able to sort of guide them through that experience we captured in the film. And I had never seen anything like that before. And you know, again, Nika's involvement is so key to the beauty of this film. So I just want to say that off top. Like that's how she helped me get through it. I created a space, and then she was able to execute from her own experience a way to bring that comfort about, so that the descendants could receive the information and feel vulnerable in front of our cameras, you know, and comfortable in doing so.
And being exposed worldwide, basically. So Nika, I'll let you respond, but you know, as far as ancestry and things like that, and the records, and for the audience, these records and these letters can be found on Ancestry as well as Family Search and the National Archives. So there's venues that are out there in databases where you can access the collection to see if your ancestor might have access to bureaus. So Nika, I'll come back to you regarding working with the descendants and things. And
Right.
you
Well,
as a
you
genealogist, you know.
Right. Well, thank you for the words, Rashidi. I don't know how to operate any other way. They were along the journey with us. So as we moved from place to place, they, you know, it wasn't like they were briefed and then we were like, okay, so at this point, cry. Like, that's not how this works.
Okay.
Like, you have to take care. Again, these are people's personal family stories, you know, and you don't just kind of put them on the spot and expect for them to react in the way that you want them to react. Like, you have to give them time and space to emote and process and deal with that. And you while you have restrictions in terms of time, right? Because there's a crew of people and all of that, you still have to give them space. And you have to make adjustments based on, you know, based on them giving the experience and living the experience. And so it was great. I mean, we had amazing people who were a part of this. I felt like, you know, we all kind of gelled in a way. I mean, how do you become involved with this story and not have some sort of connection to the people who were there? You know, it wasn't when we were watching them hug and just watching that whole moment, like everybody was all emotional. How can you not be emotional?
Yes.
That was a lot. And even being at the courthouse and standing like right there, and it's the same building.
Yes.
Right. Like, it's the same building. Like, right. And even that point when Kelly says that she's like, she wanna go see the people that was doing the most. Like, that was real. Yes, that was absolutely not like, you know, Rashidi didn't say, Nika, say this. No, that was real. So
I love hearing this, because this is how we're sitting back watching it and we question that, you know, and so it is real. So good to hear that.
That was real. That was all real. Completely real.
So Nika, is there anything else you want to share with us?
You know what? I think we do have something. The expression on his face.
So Nika is a genealogist, a professional genealogist. And you know, behind the scenes of the genealogist, there's always some cahoots going on. So Rashidi, sit back and hold on.
Wait a minute. I I love how she made it. It was me. She was a co-conspirator.
Uh,
So I could not take all the credit. Shelly was in on this from the beginning. She's the one that was like, oh, has he done this? I was like, no. And then then it went off the rails. Right. Then it went off the rails.
And this, as far as for the audience, while you're getting ready to share your screen and stuff, one of the things that is available at the Center for Family History is that people could, book appointments and talk to the research assistants there. When this museum is open and the center is basically live, they can come in there and conduct research. And they also will get tips, records, resource leads to help people on track for the new people, new to genealogy, to the experienced people. And so there's great opportunities and resources and collections that are actually going to be in the Center for Family History there. So just to share that part, we had to dig a little bit on Mr. Harper's family. And so Nika, what you going to share with us today?
Right. I have something to share. First of all, I don't appreciate his tree. I have told him this already. I'm all the hating I
love the blushing that's going on.
Right. I'm hating. Y'all gonna see, okay? Because when you start doing family history research, people hit blocks all the time. But for me and Shelly, it was like the ancestry arm kept happening over and over and over and over again for him. So I'm just gonna plop this on the screen because I know we got some genies in here. Wait a minute. Do y'all see this?
Yes.
Do y'all see this?
Yes.
Like, really? Okay. Let me go ahead and just bust you out, Harp. Okay. Number one, your family has ties to 10 states: Massachusetts, New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, Alabama, Arkansas, Mississippi, California, and Canada and South America.
wow.
Very American, I would say.
Extremely American, right. So we were able to verify connections to all 8 of your great-grandparents, which some people cannot do, even definitely people living today. We found 12 of your great-great-grandparents, 14 of your great-great-great-grandparents, and 2 great-great-great-great-grandparents. You have several ancestors that were born during the slavery era. And of course, some of these people were not enslaved. Some of them were, more likely. John Garrison Johnson was born about 1820. Marion Mackey was born between 1834 and 1836. William Goolsey was born between 1820 and 1821. Frances Ann McCarthy was born about 1820. Sophia Liscombe was born about 1830, and Joanna Woodson was born about 1847. So those are all pre-Civil War era ancestors. So I'm gonna stop for a second. I got to get feedback. What are you thinking, seeing and hearing all of this?
I mean, I'm wondering who they all are. Like, I'm definitely curious. First of all, thank you guys. Nika knows I've not just because I'm busy. I mean, I just think there's a lot of emotions that come up, right, when you start digging and going back far and learning things. It's very, very exciting to see everything sort of laid out like this. And it's amazing to say that it goes back as far as sounds like the early 1800s, pre-Civil War is what you said. That's amazing. I mean, it definitely makes me want to know more, and I'm sure some of my family that's tuning in right now, they'd be interested to hear more, but that's pretty cool what I'm looking at.
Right. Well, I have a few more things to show you. We're not done. We're almost done. We're not done.
What's so funny about this is Nika, you know how private I am, and it's hilarious that we're recording this and doing this right now. I feel like this is great. This is in the service of everyone.
Yes, that's good. Look how you explain that.
He's moderately mortified. He is. It's okay. It's okay.
I know he is.
Okay. We're gonna be okay. Okay. So first record. Okay, lots of handwriting. Rich, you remember this is all part of the process. This is the 1871 Census of Canada. On this page, we find your great-great-great-grandparents, William and Frances, in a household with their children, which include your great-great-grandmother named Minnie Goolsby. And I'm going to come in a little bit closer so you can see them. And here's the probably the most interesting story with this side, is that the surname Goolsby is known to be among the group of Black loyalists. You are likely a descendant of Black Nova Scotians.
And would you explain what a Black loyalist is in case people in the audience and Rashidi is not familiar with, but please explain.
Right. So these are folks who remain loyal to Britain. So the Queen is dead. You would be going by her casket, technically, because your folks remained loyal to the British Crown during the Revolutionary War, and they immigrated to Nova Scotia between 1783 and 1785. So you descend from Black Nova Scotians or Black loyalists, likely.
And just a side note on that, we know if people have not seen or watched a movie called The Book of Negroes and things, you will see about the 3,000 folks, Negroes, colored, whatever you want to call them, that went up to New York and got, signed in up in Canada and so forth, but that were loyal to the British. And a lot of those folks that were loyal to the British were promised their freedom, and a lot of them did not get it. So I'll leave it there and give it back to you, Nika.
Right. All right. Next, another thing, again, the ancestry arm was prominent. Your family has a ton of pictures.
Look at your folks.
There's one man on here. I'm sorry, you have his whole face, but I'm not going to say who it is. It's a few features I'm saying. Do you see anybody that looks familiar to you?
Yeah, I see my grandfather and my grandmother. And I see my grandmother's, I see both of their parents. And I see, I believe, Roland Johnson, who is the gentleman who had the papers in the Schomburg.
Right.
Those are the people that jump out.
Good.
Right. You guys have a bunch of pictures, and a lot of people don't have this many pictures. They're lucky to get one of people in these generations. So that was something else that stuck out to us. Another thing, again, in the greatest hits of the family tree of Rashidi, is the fact that your great-great-grandfather, John Albert Johnson, was the bishop of the AME Church for more than 50 years.
Yep.
To the point where he was getting full obituaries written about him in the newspaper that lay out where he was born. And you have several lines that go back to Canada. You don't just have Nova Scotians. So his whole life is a whole story by itself, worthy of a screenplay. Nudge, nudge, nudge. And
can I say something? The date that's here, December 1st, 1928, that's the date of when this was reported?
Yep.
Because December 1st is my birthday.
Right.
Interesting.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah. My grandmother, who was a descendant of John Albert, she was big on numerology. So numbers just meant a lot to her. So it's just, and I always notice stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. And so another of the greatest hits from this line is one of the things that I found that I thought was really cool, which was a letter from Bishop Johnson to W.E.B. Du Bois to commemorate his 50th birthday. He's got several things that are in the collection at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I'm not shocked by the fact that that collection is there. That makes me cackle. Either way, he's talking about how he voted for him to become a teacher at Wilberforce. And I mean, all like these really kind of intimate details you only kind of know unless people are your contemporaries and you're in a relationship with them. So there's a bunch of back and forth correspondence between Bishop Johnson and W.E.B. Du Bois. So we'll just, crown your Black excellence. Right. It's a lot. We could spend we could spend 50 years looking at all the stuff that Bishop Johnson has out there. Like literally, there's a lot.
Mhm.
Well, I hope you're ready, Nika, because we're going to do that.
Okay. All right. I got it. So last but not least, of course, I had to bring it home to California. 1950 census is the one that was the most recently released, right? Just had it come out in April. And of course, I had to find Ringing the Chickens grandma in Fresno. She's in the household with your great-grandfather, Clayton Williams, along with a couple of uncles there in Fresno. They're all listed as being born. Actually, mom and dad are Alabama, and the two sons were born at Arkansas. And Clayton is a common laborer at building sites and for a feed company on this census.
Very familiar with the Fresno family for sure. That's on my mother's side, and spent a lot of time in Fresno with my great grandmother and getting in my cousins. Yeah, great memories.
All right,
And-
you're done being mortified.
Yes. So thank you for going through that with her, us,
Oh,
in the audience.
thank you. I mean, this is again, it's the beauty of this work that you do. And it's important, especially to our community, because so many times we're running around not even knowing where we come from, and some of this information has been hidden from us, or some of it's been buried and we don't know how to find it. And so this access that you guys are presenting and spreading the word about, I think is crucial. I think it's crucial because when you understand where you come from, I think you just have a better perspective on either how you want to change how you're moving or how you want to continue along that line, And I think that hearing this information and just knowing how rich our history is, which I knew, but not to this extent, it definitely makes me, like I said earlier, even more curious and more just grateful that you guys took the time.
And I think that's the perfect term, is the grateful. And again, that is a snippet of what, is out there for people to find. So, and if you guys are okay, I'm going to turn to the questions that might be posed or comments in the Q&A, and then I'll ask you for some last parting words and appreciation for you guys being here. So it looked like Miss Mack, we basically answered your question. She had about about the descendants and their process. So we covered that. Stephanie comments, I appreciated this story. It was well told. The ancestors are proud.
Thank you.
And Miss Mack came back with, because of her own experience, Nika was in a position to prepare and guide them. Just another example of why representation matters. Ms. Robinson, remember that genealogy is their spiritual journey. For a 6-year-old to remember the details of his family can only be attributed to the God's power and grace. And that was the most exciting thing for me, is that child remembering the names of his sisters and who they were owned by. And again, that's why his letter stands out among many, but really the details that are in the letter and that journey you guys displayed, for getting back to there was just amazing. And now, Vicki McGill, you have a comment here, and you said, here comes the real good part. And I think she's talking about Rashidi's,
she was
flavor there.
Right, she was.
And so another question is to Rashidi, was it difficult to edit all the footage down to the 30 minutes?
Yeah, editing is always a challenging part of the process, but it's one of my favorites. We had a wonderful team at Paramount, led by their exec over there, Dio. Harewood, just the team he put together of editors and story producers were really helpful in just shaping what we have and just trimming out all the fat and all of that. So post it was good. I think we probably had enough. Nika and I spoke to, like, man, we could have did a whole movie with what we had. And if we shot some more days and followed up on some things, I mean, for me, the fact that Kim and Miss Marie, Kelly and Miss Marie were able to meet the other descendants from an uncle,
Right.
I mean, like that part, like that's a whole other, like, Nika, we should go and like have dinner with them at some point later this year. You know what I mean?
Right.
And just sort of like, because when you do a project like this, it's hard to put it down, right? It's like, again, these are real people, and I don't have the answer to the follow-up, like I haven't spoken to them much since we finished, but it is a reminder that I would like to know how it happened, what's happened since we filmed, and since their story has been shared on YouTube. I mean, it's like there's over 1.5 million views on YouTube alone, between two different channels. And I'm just proud to have that kind of exposure for this topic and for the idea of researching your family history. I mean, again, I'm happy that I decided to move forward and
Great. Which that you guys both just pretty much answered. Sister Calloway, California girl, her question was, had there been any updates concerning the descendants and their experience? But I think you just, reflected on that. So Dr. Clark says, what a fabulous family treasure that you are sharing with Rashidi. How special. So that's a thank you to Nika. And Tom Reed.
And you.
Well, hey, I can always get them going. I'll put it that way. So Tom Reed, who is with Family Search, Rashidi, he said, would you be interested in continuing to make films about great Black heroes that we find through genealogical research? I'm thinking of several Reconstruction era Black lawmakers documented in biographies of the book Freedom's Lawmakers by Eric Foner. So we can make those connections, with you. But if you're interested, that could be a simple yes or no.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm a storyteller. And so I'm always interested in finding stories that are intriguing and make a lot of sense for, whatever it is that I'm on at any given moment,
And you know what? It's fact-based. There's no hype. This is facts. That letter dated, location dated, so it's fact-based. So nobody's making up anything. So going to the next question, Carolyn Porcher says, do you know if the AME Church has additional information? And if so, is there a place members or others can go when doing research? And I'm probably going to throw that to Nika.
What about that Colored Conventions website? Then you have the yearly reporting out of like the CME conference that they had. So if people died, they told you they died. Right. They were elected to different positions. And then you may be able to go to the church historian, depending on where your folks were. But, you have to remember AME Church is the oldest Black denomination. So their records are very long and storied. There's a lot of stuff there.
And a lot of the churches, regardless of which faith it is, have been doing their histories. And because of the genealogical nature attached to that. So one of the things is I would contact them and find out if they have a history that they would share. A lot of publications might be out there as well. And so Sharon, and I'm going to end on the questions there and then ask for your parting words. Sharon Stiles says, what is the one thing you wish could have been included but you just didn't have time? And I think both of you might be able to answer that question. And I'm going to go to the genealogist first.
Why are you asking me first?
Because that gives him time to process. He can answer first. What is there something that you guys experienced during the time that you would have included? And thank you for your questions, everyone. They're great. Go ahead, Nika.
Right. Okay. I feel like we didn't get to talk about Hawkins after slavery. We spent a whole lot of time talking about him as an enslaved boy and all of that, and him searching for his family, but we didn't get to talk about his life after. And there was a whole lot after that happened, which that would have been like act 2 or 3.
Because he got married, he had children.
Right, he had kids. I mean, his second stage of his life was I mean, there was a lot, but for time we couldn't get into it.
The survival of being enslaved. Go ahead.
Right.
No, I think that's a good point. I was struggling trying to think of it. I mean, for me, when a project is finished, I just kind of accept it as this is what we were able to make with the set of circumstances that were presented for us. So I always just let it go. I don't tend to think about what could have been once it's done. But that's a great point. I mean, because he did have a lot of information and a whole life that was lived once he was emancipated. You know, that was powerful. You know, he was a leader, basically.
He was
leader.
He was. And we didn't get a chance to fully like dive into that part. And him being a part of stuff with Juneteenth too. That's yeah.
Oh, wow.
We didn't get a chance to go into that part. Again, his act 2 was challenging for him, but it was also incredible too.
And it's a reminder of resilience, right?
Right.
I think that's the part, you know, right now we're in this phase of sort of talking about slavery and, you know, which I think we'll continue to talk about, but the way that after slavery, after emancipation, you know, the goalposts are continually moved. Hey guys, to have a good life, you need to do these things. And then by the time you get to do these things, oh no, we're not on that anymore because, you know, Jim Crow, you know, we're not on that anymore because redlining. You know, it's just like the constant moving of the goalpost, I think, is what should be discussed next. You know what I mean? As a national conversation, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I caught your idea.
I was gonna say he just opened that door right there.
He really did. I'm like, Post-it note. All right.
So I'm going to share one more question by Rosalind Miller, and then I would like to get both of you to answer to the point of the talk we've had today. What would be the one thing you would like folks to take away? And so I'm going to give, that's your last question. But Rosalind said, when it comes to folks who have concerns about privacy, what is the best approach to take with family members to get them to share their stories? And again, Rashida, you just saw a glimpse of yours. You knew some of that things, and some things would have been new also. But how can we help this engagement to go on amongst our families?
I think people have to come to grips with whatever their lives have been, and that as times change, the way some things are perceived when you were in your 20s versus when you're in your 60s, like things that might be embarrassing. You know, there's the phrase, oh, they took it to their grave, right? They didn't tell anybody. That's not always a good thing, you know? It's like what you're missing out on is an opportunity to educate and forewarn people about mistakes that have been made in the past. I'm just assuming if there's something you don't want to share, it's because you're embarrassed in one way or the other, or you don't think it's anyone's business. But I see it as tools to learn, you know? And so that's kind of my take on it.
Nika?
Food.
Yeah,
Food.
it's go for it.
Like literally go and break bread with somebody.
Yeah.
Instead of walking into their house like, hey, Kool-Aid, tell me the stories. Let me put my phone down and record. Like, sit down, talk to them, engage them. In fact, call them and establish a relationship before you start mining them for stories, because you have to create a space where they trust you to impart that information.
Yeah.
And the fact that you are not going to judge them or operate like telephone with the rest of the family, disposing all of the drama and different things like that. Like for me, the people that have been the hardest for other people to crack, it has not been that challenge for me because I've established a relationship with them and they figured out that I'm not there to exploit their story, but there to give life to it and maybe answer questions or help give them permission to share it and also to tell them and communicate that they're valuable. Because most times with Black people, a concept I've been really ruminating on over the last few days is society has treated us like a turnabout. We are literally in the center of the turnabout. Everybody drives around Black folks all day long, talking about us, thinking about us, making all these statements, but nobody gets out of the car and literally walks up to us and asks us directly. So you don't want to enter somebody's house treating them like they're at a turnabout, like the world treats us. So work on that relationship, bake that cake, make their favorite meal, take them to their favorite restaurant. Food bribery, I am never against it. I openly advocate it. And then the stuff just starts coming out and they'll just call you.
Yeah.
One of the other things I do, get them their own notepad that's just yours. Because the old folks they think of things when vacuuming and doing other stuff. And if they have the notebook that's for Rosalind, she can say, red pumps. If she just wrote that down and then when you called her, you told her to go and get that notebook, she could say, oh, I was supposed to remember to tell you the story about when I wore those red pumps to go meet your uncle or whoever. That's another thing that I do with people too.
Absolutely. Okay, that final question. What is the one takeaway based on what we've talked about today you would like people to go away with? We talked about the film, we've talked about the genealogy, the experiences, the emotional part of this. And what would you hope people would have taken from this, the discussion we had today?
For me, I think it's just the importance of family, and not just family in the broad sense, but really the conversations and the information that is within everyone's family if we just dialogue together a little more. There's tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of stories. Even in my own family, I'm always shocked when my sons, I'm like, oh, I didn't tell you this story, or I never told you this, or it's just, it doesn't always come out naturally, and but the more you spend time together, the more you talk, the more questions that are asked, that's what I want people to take away from the film, is the importance of that time and those conversations and the recording of the information, I guess.
Yeah, and that story came from 1867 to 2022. And it will continue on. So Nika.
I would say, don't feel like you need Paramount or Ancestry or Harperville to tell your story. You likely have a Rashidi and a Nika in your own family, but you're overlooking what they're using their talent for. If you have one of these young people who was on TikTok doing this, that, and the third, redirect that skill.
Yes.
And allow them the space to be able to document and catalog your family using what they know. Because I'm sure there was a point in time where Rashida was like, could I really do this? Or could I really do that? And they never had an opportunity. Someone had to provide them with an opportunity to be able to do that. And that's, I think, one of the things, it's another way we can bridge the generational gap, is if the elders come with the stories and the young people come with the creation, then that's a way for us to be able to preserve our stories from our vantage point. And the other thing I also want to say, thank you, Rashidi, because I honestly feel like the more and more we talk about this, I'm like, we really changed the world with this story, because I don't think I've ever seen something where people saw it was possible for somebody who was enslaved to have this much power over who they were and how it was shared, and the fact that it was possible to find other people connected to it. So thank you for not being scared, and working past your own fears, to help bring the story to life. And the sky's really the limit. This is just part one. So I'm juiced. Let's go. What we gonna do again?
Well, and
Well, I'm gonna call you as soon
again,
as we hang up here.
huh?
Well, sure.
I told Nika I was gonna call her. I was gonna call her as soon as we get off this webinar. You know.
Okay. Well, and again, I appreciate the fact that you allow us, you know, the International African American Museum and the Center for Family History to host you guys to have this conversation. I do think there's great points that were shared. And I hope people will also take away that you can do the same thing in telling that story based on what you heard Nika and Rashidi say, because it was talking about family and it's talking about engagement. And we all have the stories, you know, and somebody knows something. And so the big thing is to start that dialogue within. And if there's anything at the Center for Family History that's on their current website, look at the blogs. It's saying how to find this, or here's this record, this, that, and the other, and all different topics for different levels of experiences. So again, thank you all for coming. We appreciate your time you spent with us. We will see you in October when we have Angela Walton Raji on, and she's going to talk. And here's another little story that Rashidi might not even know, but we're going to talk about the nurses, the cooks, the laundress, and the matrons, the Black women of the Civil War. So that is our next webinar in October. Stay tuned to the Facebook page, and also, of course, the museum's main page under events, that you'll get that information coming out. So thank you to everyone today, and have a great Saturday.